Erev Tov Rabotai, we are continuing with our Mishna Yomi, Masechet Baba Batra. We are up to Perek Bet Mishna Aleph. Today's Mishnayot should be Le'elu Nishmat, Neria Ben Svetlana, Ranbai Veliyahu Ben Burcha Israel of Chana Bad Miriam, Sason Ben Ryan, Yoshua Ben Shifra, Menuchatam Began Eden, Amen, and Avdi Ben Chaim L'Chaim, for the Refuah Shenemav, Daniel Shalom Ben Rosa, Betoch Shach Chole Israel, and the Achlama Merav Binyamin, Or Tzion Chai Ben Dvorah. The second chapter of this tractate deals with the laws of Harchakat Nezikin, which literally means distancing of damages. Even within a person's own property, in many circumstances, he may not perform acts such as digging, building, or storing hazardous materials if they will cause damage to the property of his neighbor. He therefore may not do certain things or store certain materials near the edge of his property where they are likely to cause harm. These laws are explained in the following Mishnayot. Mishnah Aleph begins by discussing one who wishes to dig various types of pits in his own property. Lo yachpor adam bor samuch leboro shel chavero. A person may not dig a pit in which to store water at the edge of his property near the pit of his fellow, meaning directly opposite his neighbor's pit. Velo shiach, velo ma'ara, velo amat hamayim, velo nivrechet kovsin. Nor may he dig a ditch, which is a long and narrow pit, a vault, which is a square pit covered with a roof in which there is an opening, an irrigation ditch, or a laundering pool, which is a square pit into which rainwater would gather, which was used to wash clothing, near the pit of his fellow, because this can damage his neighbor's pit. The shaking of the earth caused by the digging of his pit can cause his neighbor's pit to collapse. Also, water stored in a pit that is too close to the boundary could seep out and damage the nearby pit of a neighbor. He may not dig any of these unless he distances the outer edge of the hole of his pit or ditch from the wall of the pit of his fellow by at least 3 tvachim. The term wall of his fellow refers to the ground surrounding the pit or ditch that the neighbor has dug. The 3 tvachim of earth that surround the pit, ditch, or other holes are considered its wall. Therefore, by ruling that a person must distance his pit, the actual hole of his pit, 3 tvachim from the wall of his fellow's pit, the Mishnah is teaching that there must be actually 6 tvachim of earth between the two pits. A person may not dig a pit or ditch without distancing it 3 tvachim from the edge of his property, even if his neighbor does not yet have a pit in place, because we are concerned that his neighbor will wish to dig his own pit eventually. This applies, however, only to fields in which it is the usual practice to dig pits or ditches, such as fields that need irrigation. So again, he may not dig any of these unless he distances the outer edge of the hole of his pit or ditch from the wall of the pit of his fellow by at least 3 tvachim, so that it will not cause any damage to his neighbor's pit. Visad b'si, then he must also coat the inside of his pit with lime. The inside walls of the pit or ditch, etc., must be coated with lime, so that water stored in the hole will not seep out and damage the neighbor's pit. The Mishnah now lists materials that may not be stored near a brick or stone wall of a neighbor. מרחיקים את הגפת ואת הזבל ואת המלח ואת הסיד ואת הסלעים מקוטלו של חברו 3 טווחים. One must distance piles of olive pulp, the refuse that remains after olives have been pressed and their oil extracted, manure, salt, lime, or flint stones which were used to produce fire, at least 3 tvachim from the wall of his fellow, because heat given off by these items can damage the wall. Piles of these substances all generate heat, which can either damage the wall itself or weaken the earth beneath the wall, causing it to collapse. Here, the term wall used in the Mishnah refers to an actual above-ground wall and not to the wall of a pit. There is no need to distance these items from the boundary if the neighbor has no wall there yet, because they can easily be moved should a wall be built. The Mishnah... Visad B'sid, the Mishnah continues, or if he wishes, he can coat the neighbor's wall with a thin layer of lime to protect it instead. To protect the wall from being harmed by these items, it is enough either to distance them or to apply a thin coating of lime to the neighbor's wall. To guard against water damage, however, as in the earlier cases of the Mishnah, both distancing and a thick layer of lime is required. Now, while lime is listed here as one of the substances that harms the wall, that refers to fresh lime. A coating of dried lime will seal the wall and protect it. The Mishnah lists more actions that may not be performed too close to a neighbor's wall. מרחיקים את הזרעים ואת המחרשה ואת מרגליים מן הכותל 3 טווחים. One must distance the planting of seeds, plowing, or urinating at least 3 tvachim from his neighbor's wall, because doing any of these things too close to the wall can weaken it. If seeds are planted even by hand too close to a wall, the roots of the plants will break up the soil and weaken the wall's foundation. Plowing the land near a wall even without planting is also harmful to the foundation of the wall. Urine will dissolve bricks that are made of dried clay. Therefore, one may not urinate within 3 tvachim of a wall made of such bricks. However, if the wall is built of stones and mortar, a distance of 1 tefach suffices. And if the wall is made of hard stones alone without mortar, no distancing at all is necessary. And plastering the wall with lime does not help in these cases, plowing, planting, and urinating, because plowing and planting will damage the ground under the wall in any event, and lime alone will not help to protect the wall from damage caused by urination. Finally, the Mishnah lists appliances that must be kept away from a neighbor's wall. Marchikin et arechaim shlosha min hashechev shen arba min harechev. One must distance his millstones from a neighbor's wall. A mill was made of 2 stones. The base, the lying stone, remained in one place, and the upper stone would, so to speak, ride around in a circular indentation that was chiseled into the upper surface of the base. The grain was placed in this groove and ground between the stones. The base stone was wider than the upper stone, extending a tefach beyond the upper stone on all sides. The entire mill must be distanced at least 3 tvachim from the wall. Therefore, the upper stone will be at least 4 tvachim from the wall. So one must distance his millstones from a neighbor's wall and set them up so that the wall is at least 3 tvachim from the lower stone, which is 4 tvachim from the upper stone, what we call shechev, the lying, which is the lower stone, and rechev, the riding, which is the upper stone. This distancing is required so that the vibration caused by the millstones will not shake the nearby ground and weaken the wall. And an oven must also be distant from a neighbor's wall, so that the wall is at least 3 tvachim from the bottom of the base of the oven, which is 4 tvachim from the upper lip of the base, because the heat of an oven is harmful to a wall. Now, ovens in the time of the Mishnah were placed upon bases made of stones and clay. These bases were wider at the bottom and tapered toward the top to the width of the oven. The bottom of the base was usually 1 tefach wider than the oven itself. Therefore, since the entire apparatus had to be distant 3 tefachim from the wall, the bottom of the base would have to be 3 tefachim from the wall, with the top lip of the base as well as the oven itself being 4 tefachim from the wall. And that is in of Mishnah Aleph. Mishnah Bet discusses precautions that must be taken to prevent house fires that can cause damage to a neighbor's property. Lo ya'amid adam tanu betoch habayit. The person may not set up an oven inside his house. Enim ken yesh al gabav gova 4 amot, unless it has 4 amot of space above it. There must be at least 4 amot of open space between the opening on top of the oven and the roof or ceiling, so that the flames and heat of the oven will not cause the ceiling or roof to catch fire. Haya ma'amido ba'aliyah, if he was setting it up in the upper story of his house. There must also be a layer of plaster that is 3 tvachim thick under the oven to protect the floor. When the oven is in an upper story, there are 2 possible dangers. The roof could catch fire, and the floor supporting the oven could also catch fire. Therefore, in addition to leaving the 4 amah space above the oven to protect the roof, a thick layer of plaster is needed to protect the floor. There was no need to protect the floor when the oven was on the ground level, because their ground level floors were usually earthen. Ubikirat tefach, but if he is setting up not an oven, but merely a kira, a type of stove whose heat is less intense, a single tefach of plaster under the kira is sufficient. A kira stove was constructed differently than an oven, as the fire within it was smaller and the pots were placed above it rather than inside it. Since the flames and heat given off by a kira are less intense than those of a tanur, a tefach of plaster underneath it is enough protection. Similarly, only a tefach of open space is needed above the kira. The Mishnah cites a dispute about what is done if these rules are followed, but a fire breaks out anyway. V'mizik, but if, in spite of these precautions, the oven causes damage, mishalem ha'sheizik, he must pay for whatever damage he caused. Although the owner of the oven acted properly, he is still regarded as negligent if the oven causes a fire. Since such an oven is used constantly, he should have been more careful to ensure that there would be no mishap. According to this Tana, even though the owner will be liable in any case if his oven causes a fire, he can still be forced to take the precautions outlined in the Mishnah so that the fire does not happen in the first place. For if a fire does occur, it will often render him penniless and unable to pay for the damage that the fire will cause. Another Tana disagrees with this ruling. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Rabbi Shimon said, Lo amru kol hashiyurin ha'ele The sages stated all of these requirements only so that if he caused damage after taking the required precautions, he would be exempt from having to pay. Rabbi Shimon disagrees with the Tana Kama and holds that once a person has taken these precautions and a fire breaks out nevertheless, this is considered an unavoidable mishap and onus for which one is not liable to pay. And the Rav does tell us, Rabbi Shimon, the Halacha does not follow the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. And that is the Rabotai of today's Mishna Yomi. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen v'amen.